All right, everyone, it is 9:30, so we're Toastmasters. We're going to start on time. My name is Michael Desiderio. I am the session leader for today, and I say session leader because certainly I'm going to share some content. We'll give you some practical tips, but there's going to be exercises that I really want you to engage in. If you're looking to walk away with something useful, my advice to you as a participant is engage full on. The way this is set up, we're not going to see everybody, and that's okay. If you have questions, you can chat those in from using the chat feature. The moderator will interrupt me along the way. Please do not think that you're interrupting in a bad way. Your questions are something that add richness to the session, so you don't have to wait till the end. Certainly, there'll be time at the end to engage any additional questions that might come to mind. But my style is, if you have a question, interrupt me along the way. It's your question. It's your time. I'm just here to lead us through a process that hopefully leaves you with something useful. And my experience says that it should if you engage. So the topic is called Frame of Reference, the Power of Context. I don't expect you to see that tiny writing on my door, but I can tell you it says context matters. It's something that I believe for job seekers, job switchers, those that are in growth mode, that are moving up a ladder at a company, and every one of us that leads our life. Context matters. And I'm going to hopefully convince you of that in a variety of ways as we go through today's learning experience together. So my current role, if you didn't read my bio, I'm an executive for an association of business schools. We have about 200 business schools in 40 countries that I represent, but I'm also a speaker. I'm a talking head for the association. I do lots of media and press work, and I also am a Toastmaster and someone who looks at speaking as both a vocation and an avocation. And so that's why I've learned over the course of 36 years of my career that context matters, but it also matters in our personal lives, and we'll talk about that as well. So if you have a question, again, just ask along the way. But I'm going to go ahead and start with something that I think is important. I think many people will say, Michael, I already know that I'm smarter than I think, but do you believe that at your core? And you may say, I already know that I know a lot more than I believe I know. Well, maybe that's how you exude your confidence. But I want to prove that to you today. I want to prove that our minds, your minds, are stronger than even you believe. And so I'm going to do that through an exercise. And because we're not in a room together and I can't see you, this is all going to be done on the honor system. You're in some bubble by yourself. Maybe you're in your home, you're in your office, wherever you might be. I want you to follow the rules and engage. That's how you learn best. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you to grab a pencil, a pen, a piece of paper, something that eventually you can write on. You're not going to need it yet. You'll need it in a couple of minutes, but I want you to have access to it because it's going to be important for you to have access to it fairly quickly once I say go. But for the moment, I want you to put pen, paper down, whatever device you're used to texting on, email, just disconnect from all of that and focus, because I'm going to read you a list of words. I'm going to read you a very specific list of words. And I don't want you to cheat. I want you to just listen. I'll tell you when it's time to start writing. That time hasn't happened yet. I'm going to assume everybody's with me. If you're not, chat in and say, Michael, I'm not with you. But I'm assuming you're all with me. So here we go. Remember, you're listening. You're not writing or typing. Thread, thorn, syringe, pin, prick, thimble, cloth, sharp, eye, haystack, knitting, poke, sewing, crochet, shard, hurt, point, injection. Go ahead. I'm going to start a clock. Write down as many words as you can recall from the list. Start now. I'll tell you when to stop. Write as many as you can possibly remember. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what somebody else in the virtual room is doing. It's about you. All right, I am going to assume that everyone is where they need to be. Put your pen down, put your paper down just for a second. Take a breath and focus on part 2. Now, part 2, I'll show you an example. What I want you to do in that same piece of paper, different piece of paper, whatever is convenient for you, or if you're typing on a computer, that is fine as well. I want you to write down the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it should look something like this with blank spaces. In a moment, I'm going to read off a word that's the first word. Then I'm going to read a second word. I'm going to read a third word, a fourth word, a fifth word. Do not write the words down that I'm reading. What I want you to write down when I say whatever the first word is in slot 1, you write down a percentage. If you are 100% sure that the word I just said, when I'm about to say it, was on the original list I read, then you write 100%. Now you might be saying, Michael, does that mean if it was not on my list, I can't put 100%? No, because sometimes what happens is when I say the word, you go, oh, it wasn't on my list, but it was on the original list. I'm 100% sure word 1 was on the original list. Then in slot 2, just making an example, I'm going to read another word. You may go, I'm sure the word was not on the original list. You write 0%. And if it's somewhere you're like, I'm really not sure if it was or wasn't, write 50%. And so you'll end up with something that looks like this. Not mine exactly, right? It's just an example, right? If you were 100% sure that first word was on the original list, you write 100%. If you're sure the second word was not on the list, you'll write 0%. And if the third word, you're like, I'm really not sure, you'll write 50% and so on. I'm going to assume everybody's with me. If you're not, chat in right now. Michael, I'm confused. I don't see any chats. Anna, keep me honest. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. And Anna, if you wouldn't mind, in the polls, if you would type in the question, not yet, I'll tell you when, Anna, that is, just want to cue you up. So I'm going to go ahead and read off the 5 words. Pin is word number 1. Long, word number 2. Needle, word number 3. Stick, word number 4. And hurt, word number 5. So again, pin, long, needle, stick, hurt. You're writing a percentage for each of those words. You'll end up with something like this. So now, Anna, if you would put that first poll in. And the question is, let's just pick one of the words. So the third word I said was needle, right, of those 5 words. The question I have in the poll, hopefully Anna will be able to type this in there. You'll see it in a moment. Was the word needle on your original list? Forget the percentages for a second. Was the word needle on your original list? Yes or no? So you can respond to the poll. You did. Well, I'm not seeing the results, so you'll have it for whatever reason.
Oh, that's all.
But if everybody else is, that's all that matters. You'll just have to tell me what they are. How many yeses?
33.3% of yeses, that's 2 votes, and 4 votes for no, that's 6.
Okay. So 3 people at 33% said needle was on their original list. So now, Anna, if you can build the second poll, is do you have 100% for the third word, needle? So some of you didn't have needle on your original list. But when you heard me say it in that third slot, you're like, oh, how did I miss the word needle? Of course, needle was on the list, 100%. So the next poll will ask you, did you have 100% for the third word, needle? And there is a method to the madness here. And again, Anna, for whatever reason, I can't see the results. If you can just give me the percentages, I don't really need the absolute numbers. That would be awesome. I can see the second poll was the word needle. Oh, that was the first one. What did you have? 100% for the third word, needle.
Votes are coming in.
Okay.
Right now it's 50-50. 2 votes for yes and 2 votes for
and
no.
some that decided not to vote, which is fair. We understand. All right. So I'm not even going to launch the third poll because I can already see what I want you to see. So there was 33% of you, whatever the number, absolute number was, that had needle on your original list. And then you heard me say needle when I read the second list, and you're like, oh, so it added another person, apparently. When it went up to 50%. Now, I can tell you if we were in a larger group, because statistics does help here, usually when I've done this, I've done it with audiences as small as 5 or 6 people and as big as 300 or 400. And what you find as the numbers go up, right, the percentages usually split about 50-50. You're close. So 33% of you, whatever the number was, 2 or 3 of you said needle was on the original list. Needle wasn't on the original list. And then when you heard me say it, you're like, oh, crud, how did I miss it? Needle was on the list, and it goes up. And that happens no matter what the audience size is. And it usually moves from 30 or 40% the first time to 50 or 60% the second time. Because the group is so small, there's no point in looking at how many of you had 0%. Here's the point. The framing, the words that I gave you created an image in your mind for some of you that needle was on the list when in fact it wasn't. Now I can tell you I've done this for a large audience, and I had one woman, this was about 150 people in this audience, and that audience skewed even higher, right? About 70% of the people ultimately said needle was on the first list. And this woman was so convinced that she raised her hand and she said, Michael, I think you inserted the word needle and just didn't realize it. So we had to go back later. I promised her I would let her see the video of the session so she knew that I didn't say the word needle. So why am I having you go through this exercise? So this is called false memory. Attorneys use this. You'll see it happen where witnesses recall something that never happened. You may see it with your spouse or your significant other. Have any of you had a situation where you both, you and whoever it is, your wife, your husband, your partner, go, no, honey, you're wrong. This is what happened. And that other person is going, no, you are wrong. And you're both convinced. That's false memory, because our experience will shape how we see things. And words clearly matter, right? If I gave you a different set of words, you wouldn't have needle on the list, because the words create images in our minds. But it's not just in our minds. It's in the minds of others. And if we create words, if we use words that create images in the minds of others, we need to be mindful of that. So you can see here the word odor. If you want to chat in what comes to your mind with the word odor, feel free. For many people, it's usually not a positive image, right? But then if you take the word smell, someone like, yeah, something that smell, I'm not sure. What's that smell, right? And then aroma. Suddenly, right, you have these images. What comes to your mind when you hear the word aroma? For some people, it might be coffee, right? Something, a scented candle, or a perfume I see coming in. Fragrance is another one that's often associated with perfume. And then if I go to bouquet, right? This wine, that wine had a beautiful bouquet. All of these words really mean pretty much the same thing. They're having to do with our sense of smell, but they conjure up very different images. And we, as interviewees, as interviewers, as spouses, as partners, as stakeholders, as leaders, as subordinates, need to remember that. The words we use matter. The words we use can lead to false memory. And you're good, Michael, now you're freaking me out. You mean I have to think about every single word that I say? No, of course not. But we're talking about when we're trying to represent ourselves in a very positive light. We just have to remember that the frame of reference matters. The lens through which we see the world and through which others see the world matters. It matters wherever you are in your career cycle. Again, job switcher, job changer, in growth mode. So you're saying, well, Michael, that was a cute exercise, but you kind of tricked us. You gave us words that led us down the path. Well, when you see this, let me trick you in another way. And I'm going to tell you I'm tricking you up front. It's an optical illusion, right? It looks like a spiral that goes on for infinity. Well, in fact, it's not. It's a set of concentric circles. Again, our brain is trained to fill in the gap. Like if we're not sure, it's like, oh, this is a spiral. But no, it's actually a set of circles that goes on. And they use this in psychology for different experiments. But again, I'm telling you this, our brains can be fooled. And before we're done, I hope to convince you that no matter how smart we are, we can all believe things that are not real. And oftentimes we can miss things that are. And that's important when we're trying to represent who we are in an interview, in our career ladder, or in our everyday lives. We have to keep that in mind. And so, again, if you have a question along the way, just interrupt me. I'm good with that. But if not, we're going to continue down this path of why this matters. So our experiences shape what we say. If I have a set of experiences and you have a set of experiences that are different, we may say things differently. It'll influence, right, what we hear. And actually, it influences what we see. You've seen that in two real exercises that you've just participated in. But here's something else, which is in some ways even more important. Our experiences not only shape what we say, what we hear, and what we see, but ultimately, they influence how we act. And so years ago, I was doing a workshop specifically focused on interviewing. And a young woman stood up in this audience. The audience was about 125 people. And she stepped out of the row and she said, "Hey, Michael, I have a question for you. When you look at the way I'm dressed at the moment, do you think it's fair that when I go into an interview that I'm judged?" Now, her framing of her words already put me at a disadvantage. So I acknowledged that. I said, well, you're not really asking a question. You've already driven to a conclusion. And I should tell you, she was dressed in a very tight mini skirt, a very tight top. And I said to her, no, I mean, do I think it's fair that any of us are ever judged? No. But the reality is that because whoever's sitting behind the desk interviewing you, man, woman, whatever it might be, dog, cat, pick it, their frame of reference might be different than yours. So they may not see it the way you see it. So I'm not going to tell you what's appropriate or what's not appropriate. We're all adults here. As long as we understand that what we say, what we hear, and what we see influences how we perceive things as the receiver, but also will influence how we act in response to the person, fair or not. So, because I don't want you to think I'm sitting here, standing here, like I'm on the mountain and I'm smarter than any of you. No, I'm like you. We are all shaped by this. Context matters. So let me give you another example. I was at a conference back in the days of face-to-face conferences, a massive conference, about 6,000 people. And I was in a breakout breakfast of about 100. And it was a full breakfast. And they had whatever you might expect, eggs and yogurt and all the things that you might expect at a buffet. And I was looking for water. There was no pitchers of water on the table. So I went over to one of the event organizers. I said, "Do you have any water?" She said, "Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of water right over there, right before the buffet starts." And she pointed to the front of the buffet. And I walked over there. And I'm looking for water, and I don't see it. And I went back to her. I said, I really apologize. Did I misunderstand you where you said the water was? She goes, no, the water is right there. And I'm looking for pitchers of water. I'm looking for bottles of water, and I don't see water. And she's like, "Sir, I promise you it's there. Just go back there. You'll see it. I need to run to the next event." And so I go back over, and wouldn't you know it, she was right. There were these boxes, these white boxes that I thought were milk. It clearly says on it, boxed water. I had never seen boxed water in my life. And I promise you, I'm not making this up. I looked past rows and rows of boxed water because was convinced they were either milk or juice, because that's what my frame of reference, that's what my experience had taught me. And when I opened my eyes and actually read the words boxed water, there it was. This is true for all of us. We are so sure that we know what we mean. We know what to expect. And then we walk out of an interview, we walk out of that promotion discussion, and we go, why didn't that go well? Because context matters. And if we're aware of the fact that context matters, all of a sudden we can see the boxed water. She could see it clearly. I couldn't. None of us are above or below it. This is not about intelligence. It's about our frame of reference, and that context matters. But then you might say, Mike, well, communication really isn't that hard. It's pretty simple. Really? No, it's really not that simple. And it's a cute cartoon, right? And that is why we lift on 3 and they drop the poor patient. I love this quote because I don't think communication is simple. It's a quote from George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that has taken place. And you see this in your life all the time, right? Where you end up in an argument. Maybe it's not at work. Maybe it's with somebody in your personal life. And you're like, I can't believe that they took that a different way. I clearly said A, B, C, and they're at X, Y, Z. How is that even possible? Because we assume once we say something, that communication has happened. And that's the illusion that Mr. Shaw is talking about. So it's the same thing. We have to prepare ourselves. There are many things we can do to prepare ourselves as we enter interviews, as we enter a boardroom and having discussion with peers, or we enter a meeting with our colleagues. Again, I'm not suggesting you have to plan every word. You have to be aware that context matters, and everybody's going to see things differently because their life experience has been different, and it's shaped how they look at the world. But what's the goal? Ultimately, the goal is always influence. So people say to me, Michael, I can change someone's mind. I said, you can influence it because ultimately they have to take an action. If you're an interviewee, you don't get to hire you. Yes, you can go in there. You can prepare. You can do everything, and you should do everything that you can to be prepared. But your goal is to influence a decision because you're not the one making the decision. I believe that that's true in sales as well. You're influencing someone. You're trying to close them, but you're influencing them. Right? It's a transference of belief, but you don't get to write on the contract for them. They get to do that. That's true with an interviewer, and it's true as someone that's a peer at work when you're trying to convince someone that your idea, your new product idea, your new process innovation is worth it. Influence is the goal because you don't get to change their mind. And if we come from that frame of reference and understand that context matters, suddenly we get, okay, maybe I need to change the framing. Maybe I shouldn't be thinking odor. I should be thinking bouquet. So if it matters and context has real power, what can we do about it? Well, the truth is you would love for me to lay out, here's the 6 things you do, and it's guaranteed that context will be in your favor. But it's art and it's science. Framing context is art and science, and that's why it's so difficult. So first I want to talk about, what does the science say? So if you email me directly, and at the end there'll be my email address, and you want copies of any of these articles, these are from research reports, I am happy to share those with you. Just email me, say, Michael, I want the copy of what you were reading from. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to give you an example. Remember, what I'm talking about here is the science of context. So there was a study that was done, and this was connected to a very serious thing. It was connected to social work and how people view neglect when children are left intentionally alone in a home. And here's what they found, in case you think context has no science to it. Study author Dr. Charles Jennison, a clinical professor at the University of Iowa, Carver Center of Medicine, said this: social workers in a study that they did were far more likely to consider it neglect if you left the child alone if the child got hurt. If the child didn't get hurt, it wasn't considered neglect. right? The context, the science says the context matters, but it's the same thing. So the study author goes on to say it shouldn't matter. It's either neglect or it's not neglect. Just so happens somebody got hurt. Oh, now we view it as neglect. Well, shouldn't it have been neglect anyway? Now, I'm not debating what age somebody you could leave your kids alone. That's not what I'm saying. Here's a study done by a prestigious university, a medical school, a school of medicine, saying context matters. Let me give you another one. 17 wacky things that are actually good for your body. That was the title of this article, and it references a study. And it goes through a bunch of different things. I'm going to give you one of the things that it talks about. Apples and cucumbers. You're thinking, yeah, I know those are good for me. That's not what this study was about. What they were trying to figure out is if smelling certain things could minimize, yes, people have put money to this, minimize the feeling of claustrophobia. And it turns out when people smell apples, smell cucumbers, if they're claustrophobic, it reduces that sense of claustrophobia. Again, I didn't write these. I didn't do the studies. I didn't commission them. Context matters, right? Our brain changes. Now, all of a sudden, I'm smelling something different, and the idea of being closed in feels differently. They changed the frame of reference, and my perception changed. I'll give you one more. I have many, but I'm going to just give you one more. I like three. I like doing things in threes, right? So here are small behaviors that influence how people judge your personality. We don't want to be judged, but the reality is we're being judged. And this is sad, I know. 2018 study disclosed that your first name can affect how people view your personality, your age, and your competency. Context matters. And you say, Michael, so should I go change my name? No. So we have to do other things that we can control to influence people. My gray hair has people all the time saying to me when I'm with my 10-year-old son, you're his grandfather. No, I'm his dad, right? So the science says the context matters. But here's where we have more control, is the art. And that's where Toastmasters brings its magic. Because Toastmasters teaches us the art. Yes, it can teach us some of the science, the discipline behind effective communication, but it helps us master the art, which is this subjective thing. Art is very subjective. That's what makes this so hard. Let me give you another example. Here's a piece of art. Obviously, it's a picture of a piece of art, but it's an actual piece of art. Small group, so it's going to be a little bit differently, but you're looking at this. Chat in, if you're willing, what you think of this piece of art. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you see something that makes you go, wow, that's cool? Do you see something that makes you go, that's terrible? Chat it in, if you're willing. And while you're thinking about doing that, I've done this again in front of a much larger audience. And I had a split where some people said I would pay $100 for that piece of art. It's clearly not a Picasso. I wouldn't buy it, somebody said. Paul's saying it's cool. Maybe he's saying it's cool that she wouldn't buy it. I like the background, but don't love the whole look of the art and would not buy it. Right? So I had an audience going back and forth. One person I said I'd pay up to $100 for it. Some people said, no way. Well, let me tell you about this piece of art. You like the background. That's what Ashley said. But she wouldn't pay for it. Somebody else said, it's neutral, reminds me of Romans. Art is in the eye of the beholder. Exactly right, Marie. I completely agree with you. It's very subjective. So this is a piece of art that I created. My wife and son took me to one of these places where you get a blank palette and they give you a picture and you copy it. Paul, who's a good friend of mine, said he put it in his wine cellar. Maybe he didn't realize that it was me who created this. And so I'm creating this. You can tell I'm not an artist. And while I'm doing this, I'm looking at it and I go, I can't believe I put the stem of the wine glass not in the center of the glass like it should be. I'm looking at this. I'm thinking, how did I do this? But I'm not saying this out loud. I'm saying it to myself. And there's a professional artist walking around in the studio. And she comes up behind me and she goes, oh, what a great interpretation of a wine glass. And I looked at her and I said, what are you talking about? She goes, oh, it's a great interpretation. You know, you could have centered it. I said, it's not an interpretation. I just drew it in the wrong spot, right? And she's like, no, that's what art is. very subjective, and that's what makes this part of it difficult. But we can teach and we can learn things from Toastmasters, people like me, and many others that you'll hear from today. So I have a whole presentation focused on what I call presentation foreplays, because I think there's 4 plays of an effective presentation, but it's not just a presentation, it's any interaction. See, when we think of a presentation, we think of this, what I'm doing now. But every time we're trying to communicate something positive about ourselves in an interview, right? It's an interaction, but it's a presentation. It may not have a slide deck. It may not have that level of, I get to use audio visual, but it is us presenting ourselves in some light. And we want to influence that in a way that makes us hopefully win the job, win the promotion, convince them to take our new project idea, our new business idea, and move it forward. And there's 4 plays, 4 buckets, if you will, that I think we have to focus on. Presence, mechanics, content, the content itself, but in context, and then the setting. And I'm going to briefly touch on all of these. And again, if you have a question, you just interrupt me along the way, because this is the art piece of it. Right? So presence is this thing that people often go, I really don't know, how can I create a presence? And I love this quote from Walt Whitman: we convince by our presence. And so if we were doing a 4-hour workshop on these items, I would go much deeper, but I want to give you the keys to each of them. And the keys is, what question do you need to ask yourself as it relates to presence, your presence? And I'm going to say, you want to create an aura. And you're like, Michael, this sounds very zen, very fluffy. It's not fluffy at all, because there's things we can do to influence our presence. Now, some of us have natural presence. Shaquille O'Neal walks into a room, his physical stature gives him some kind of presence. Mother Teresa, who's now deceased, was a very small woman, but many people that interacted with her, I did not have the privilege of that, would say she had this amazing presence. It was a different kind of presence because her physical stature, totally different than Shaquille O'Neal. So how do those 2 different people, how can they both have presence if it's not just all about physicality? We can influence it. We can influence it by our attire. Our attire creates presence. It doesn't mean you need to put a jacket on like me. If that's not your thing, if that doesn't fit your brand, who you are, then find something that does. But it creates presence. Confidence creates presence, not arrogance. Arrogance can work against us from a presence standpoint. And there's a fine line, right? Confidence says, I feel competent. I have some mastery of my content. Arrogance says, I know more than everybody else in the room. And the people that aren't here, I know more than them too. Nor can anyone teach me anything, right? It's a subtle difference, but an important difference. The other thing you can do for presence is to think about how do I best represent who I am from my attire, from the brand image that I create, from the way I walk into a room, the way I walk out of a room. Those are all the art pieces of it. Those are things that Toastmasters can help you with. And again, I don't get anything from saying I work for Toastmasters. I'm a Toastmaster. They don't send me a check. I'm just saying this is a way that you can build that skill of learning, how do I build presence? And it's not just being at the front of a room on a stage. It's being across the desk from somebody. It's being in a room with your peers. And again, trying to influence them to embrace your idea. Mechanics. Now, mechanics is all about how do we think about our delivery? How do we maximize delivery? Right? Because here's a great quote from Patricia Fripp. She's an executive coach that actually trains executives, but also trains speakers. It doesn't matter what you have to say. It matters what they see when you say it. It matters what they see when you say it. That's the art of delivery. And delivery isn't just standing in front of a camera to give a presentation. It could be standing in front of a camera, sitting in front of a camera in a job interview, or selling your idea to a bank, or selling your next great product on Shark Tank, or whatever it might be. How you say it is just as important as what you say. Doesn't mean you have to plan out every single gesture, but it's being mindful, learning the skills, learning the art of what are the things that communicate something positive as opposed to something negative or something that is not really that good, right? It's a difference. You can feel it. You know it. Mechanics, delivery matters. Toastmasters is a great place to learn that. And then I've said a lot about context, but I want to remind you that how you frame it will totally change the perception of your words. We saw it in the first exercise with needle, where some of you believed that word wasn't there. I was there when it actually wasn't. So you have to keep this in mind. Here's a great quote for me. I always throw this in really as a joke, but it's true. The content without the context, it's half the story. It may even be less than half the story. It's the wrong story. And often we see that happen, going back to that example where you walk away from an interaction going, how did they get that message? That's not what I said. But the framing, the context left them with that impression. You walk out of a job interview that you were totally prepared for, and you go, how did I not hit a home run? Why did I walk out feeling like I totally missed the connection? Got to think about the context and how we frame things. And then finally, you got to think about the setting, right? We have to think about the setting that we're in. So I thought about the setting I'm in today for this presentation, which was a much different setting. The last time I did this face-to-face to a group of 400 people, right? I'm on a big stage, there's lighting. There's some of that here today, but I'm here in a bubble by myself. I can't hear your reactions. I can't see your facial expressions. I can't respond to you. So I have to ask the question, how is this person, if it's a one-on-one interaction, or how is this group unique? And how do I need to change my framing? How do I need to think about my words? What do I need to do with my gestures? And I'll give you another example. Years ago, we were citing to do an event, an offsite event. And we looked at the actual Queen Mary, which I don't know if it's still there. It used to be docked in Long Beach. And we were going to do a private tour of the Queen Mary. Myself, one of my colleagues, and somebody from the city of Long Beach. Well, apparently they hadn't told the person on the Queen Mary that there was 3 people coming, because we go on this tour with this gentleman who does these tours for 400 and 500 people. And he did the tour exactly like he would have done it if there was 400 people and it was 3 of us. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, this is where, I'm like, I leaned over to the woman from Long Beach. I said, like, does he know there's 3 of us? And he did that for 30 minutes, right? Think about the person and group that you're interacting with. How is it unique? How do you need to alter your framing? How does the context affect your words? What should you do from a delivery standpoint? Should you be like this when you're in an interview with one person? Or should you perhaps have a different demeanor? Should you change your presence? Should you alter your presence? Take the whatever it is for you. If you're a stage person and you're used to being flashy, maybe that doesn't work in the one-on-one setting. So keep the setting in mind. It's critical. And then we have to remember that when we're communicating with one person, there's one communication channel, right? It's back and forth. It's between us. When there's 6 people, it's an organizational setting, there are a lot more than the 6 communication paths that you might think are obvious. Because what happens is everybody can communicate with everybody. So in this example, if there's 6 people, there's 15 communication channels. And I want to leave the smart people out there. Look, I need something. I need an equation. Here's what it is, right? So if you plug in the number of people and solve this very simple equation, you'll get 15 communication channels. Put in the number 15 people, and you'll watch it grow dramatically. And then we wonder why, hey, I had this interaction with one person, and it was simple. It was easy. And I said the same thing in front of a group of people, and suddenly, by the time things were done, it totally changed because there were so many more channels. And social media is a perfect example of this today, right? Things change and grow and take on a life of their own. If you gave me your phone for 2 weeks and let me build a newsfeed channel for you, I could change what you're receiving on your newsfeed by what I select. Right? So we can all be influenced because the communication channels grow. And suddenly now things that we said are altered slightly because my experience base is different than yours. So when I communicated to the other person in the organization, it's shifted slightly. Again, keep this in mind. one-on-one communication is not harder or easier. It's just different. You have to take into account when you're communicating to a larger group, because the framing for each of those people is different than the one person you may have been communicating with at that moment in time. So words matter. Hopefully we agree on that at this point. And the framing is either going to amplify those words or diminish them. Right? It's either going to make needle really prominent when needle isn't there, or make it disappear when it is there. Framing is going to amplify or diminish our words. So we need to keep that in mind. And then this idea that context has power is really important. And none of us are immune to it. Now, at this point, some of you are saying, Michael, I got the needle exercise. You didn't fool me on that one. I knew that was a spiral because you told me it was an optical illusion. I knew it wasn't a spiral. It was concentric circles. I've heard of boxed water before. Like, I'm just smarter than the rest of people. This whole idea that context matters, really, it's not that impressive. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to go out and keep doing what I'm doing. Well, I'm going to try one more time to convince you that context matters. Because if you leave here today and you take that with you and you embrace that concept, it will change your interactions with the people in your personal life. It will change your interactions in the job setting. It will change your interactions as you try to sell your new idea. Because when you go to sell an idea to a group of salespeople, or you go to sell it to a group of CPAs at a bank, maybe finance guys, finance women, it's going to be totally different. You have to reshape it. Take into account the context. So I want to do one more example with you. So I'm going to give you the lyrics to a song here. All right, here they are. You can read them. I'm not going to read them to you. It's the start front end of a song that I really like. And in the chat, if you're willing, I'm not going to do a poll, but if you're willing, chat in whether or not reading the lyrics, you like them. So put either in like or don't like. Like, don't like. Pretty simple. If I was typing in, I'd put in like, because I like this. Susan Miller says she likes the lyrics when she reads them. Johnny likes them. Ashley likes them. A lot of people like the lyrics. This is great. Well, let's try something else. Let's give you Michael's. Look, somebody doesn't like them. Marie does not like the lyrics. No context, Marie says. That's right. I'm about to give you some context. Right? So here's number 2. I'm going to give you Michael's interpretation of this song. I told you I like this song. So when I read these first words, I use this song as a way to motivate myself before I take a stage in auditoriums and even today. So feel it coming in the air and the screams from everywhere. I'm thinking in the old days, right? When I can actually hear you, like people are screaming, they're excited that I've taken the platform. Doesn't mean it's true. This is my interpretation. I'm addicted to the thrill. It's a dangerous love affair. Those that know me well know that I love the art of speaking. I love the science of speaking. I love this platform, virtual or otherwise. And so I am addicted to it. And it's dangerous when you have an addiction to anything. It's dangerous because that's all you want to do. Can't be scared when it goes down. Got a problem? Tell me now. And I always think of this line and I go, okay, if I've got any issues with my content before I step on stage, I got to deal with those now. Once I'm out there, it's too late. This is what these words mean to me that I use to motivate myself. Only thing that's on my mind is who's going to run the town tonight. And for me, that means I'm going to go out there. They're going to love me. It's going to be great. Doesn't mean it's true. So when you hear that context now, Marie, you may not still like it, but has it changed your thinking? So do you still like this? Do you no longer like it? Johnny's like, hey, Michael, I heard your interpretation. I don't like it now. Before I liked it. Now you just ruined it for me. Marie says now she likes it, right? She has some context. Well, let's do something else. If the technology cooperates, let's have the actual artist sing the opening for you. So now you hear the actual artist singing it. Does it change it for you? Do you like it? If you didn't like it before, or if you liked it before just reading the lyrics, Johnny says, I still like it. Maria, I'd be curious since you went from don't like it to yup. Susan says, I still like it. Now Marie says she loves it. Clearly what I did wasn't enough for Marie. She loves it now. Let's do one more. Now let's take the music video. Watch it closely. Okay, so I love Jay-Z and Rihanna. That's who the two main artists were there. Kanye West is in this picture here. So do you like it now? Because I can tell you, when I've done this in large audience, the video is usually the one that pushes people one way or the other. They see Molotov cocktails, bullets. They're like, oh my, you lost me now, Michael. I hate this, right? Marie says Rihanna's a badass. I love it. Still like it. I don't like it either. Haha. See, so I love all four of them. My point is that as you shift the context, as you shift the frame of reference, it feels different. People most times like the audio because Rihanna's got this beautiful voice. And then you see the video and most people go, oh my goodness, how are you even showing this in a professional setting? I'm showing it because I know that people have a visceral reaction. I love all four. Maybe that tells you something about me. Context matters. Remember this. None of us, not me, not all the smart people on this, none of us are immune from it. We all can be influenced by the context. And once we embrace that concept, we can use it in our favor. We can use it to shape and influence in a way that has a game-changing effect on whether or not we get the job, on whether or not we get the promotion, on whether or not we get the funding. It doesn't guarantee it, but it increases our odds. And that's all we can do. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the goal of influence, and context matters. I wanted to leave, I gave you the opportunity to ask questions along the way. And I do want to at least open it up if there's any questions in the last 5 or 6 minutes that we have. You can either unmute, and Anna can probably tell you how to do that, or you can just chat it in if you have a question. So there is a question. Johnny's asked, can you summarize what you just talked about? You bet, Johnny, and it's pretty easy, and it's a great question. Frame of reference is the lens through which we see the world, but it's also the lens through which others see the world. Context, the environment, the words, the action, the packaging of us and how we interact with others matters. And it's constantly moving. And what's also moving is our frame of reference, because our life experience is changing, which means we need to change. We get access to new information. It should influence how we think about things. It should change how we present ourselves. I wouldn't stand in front of you today in an outfit that I wore in the 1980s, unless this was a disco party. So you have to think about the context in today's environment. If you're trying to get a job interview, what's the context? I'm going to be interviewing with one person. It's a panel interview. It's a Zoom interview. Oh no, they've invited me down. I'm supposed to wear a mask, but I'm supposed to come down in person. What's the context and how should I shape how I interact in that setting? Are there any books on this topic that you think you could recommend? There's a great book. Thanks for asking. I'm looking for it. I don't have it in front of me. There's a new, and it's not frame of reference per se. Like that's not the title of it. It's called Think Again by Adam Grant. Adam Grant's an author out of the Wharton School of Business. It's written many books. He's now a speaker. He speaks all over the world. But his new book called Think Again is how do we retrain our brains to relearn and rethink? Because we have to change. The context is changing around us. We have to learn how to think differently. And how do we relearn, learn new things? So his book is called Think Again. The author, again, is Adam Grant. I highly recommend it. Go out, grab it. You can get it on Amazon. I know $16. You can get it as an ebook. I have it as a hard copy because I like to mark it up and pull pages out and all that kind of stuff. That's the best book I can think of right now. It's a great book. Thank you, everyone. I think my time is up. Have a great rest of the conference.